achievable through technology. Better living, robust health, and, for the first time in human history, the possibility of world peace.
Welcome to 2001. 2001 is a movie very near and dear to my heart. This movie is almost always a number one pick on any sci-fi top 10 list for movies, and for me, it definitely holds up. The movie in 2024 is going to be 56 years old, and the fact that Kubrick filmed this movie, edited it, and released it in theaters a whole year before we ever put a man on the moon is just insane. Alright, enough glazing, let's go through the movie. This movie starts with the apes, and essentially this movie boils down to three different places and settings in time. The apes before modern humans, the mission to Jupiter with Haywood Floyd in the middle of the movie to observe the monolith, and the astronauts with Hal, the artificial robot with David Bowman and Frank Poole and the group of astronauts. Side note, Hal is the most terrifying villain in cinema, period. Just need to get that out there. Anyways, with the apes, this movie looks to answer what would happen if an object were to be dropped down that somehow moved evolution forward, in whichever form that may be, which is what happens. And to debate what the monolith is fun to analyze, but in this context, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like how people try to dissect and really get down into the nitty-gritty details of Interstellar in terms of the future humans or the aliens. Watch out for my review and analysis soon. But anyways, this monolith was brought to Earth by somebody to push evolution forward, because that is what happens. That's what the movie is about. And the aspect of religion in the very end can be attributed to the movie, or it could be just aliens. Why do they care about this? Are we alone? Etc. Those types of questions. Who knows? But in this movie, the main story is that humans aren't and will never progress at a rate evolutionarily that is fast enough for us to explore and become better species before we die, or at least in my opinion. Because specifically in the movie points to this exact discussion. They don't actually point to any conclusion. Therefore, the shadow aliens need to speed up evolution, since humanity is not progressing far enough. Even though the apes to us are creatures and animals, the same humans exploring the monoliths on Jupiter in the second part, in fact, are the same creatures and animals, just propelled forward by the monolith. Yes, we like to assume we have such sophisticated machinery and tech, but we are nowhere near our final form, which is, in this movie, the Star Child. Even after the Jupiter mission, when the team with Hal goes to the monolith in outer space, Hal, too, is an animal compared to where we want to be. And even though we have created such beautiful things, i.e. Hal, the question stands, is the monolith responsible for human evolution because of its existence, or does it compel us to change only by existing? Or basically, does the monolith exude some sort of power for our own evolution, or is it just a placebo? Now, there's no right answer, because ultimately it will come up with the same conclusion, that humanity evolves faster. But it is an interesting question to ponder. But coming off of the philosophical questions for a little bit, this movie, in my opinion, is the best in terms of what the movie hints at in terms of theme. For me, there's a sliding scale. On one end of the spectrum, there's this movie, perfect in its theme and points to a very vague sense of who these beings are, what the monolith is, and what the movie is about. In the middle, there's a movie like Interstellar. It's perfect, it's short, not really, but it's sweet. It doesn't really leave anything to the imagination except for maybe the future humans at the very end, but even that gets explained away through exposition. So Interstellar is sort of mid in terms of the themes and ambiguity. On the very end of the scale, the poorer of all three movies, the three movies, is Ad Astra, starring Brad Pitt. This movie is not subtle at all, and it very much implies themes of religion, themes of the Bible, and all that stuff, to the point where it's honestly not really interesting and kind of boring to watch. In this final act, Hal suspects that he will be shut off, and over the course of a few scenes, his demeanor shifts so much that you can't really tell. Now, this would never work if it was a person, So if it was one of the astronauts, for example, that developed this psychopathy, you would need at least a couple of scenes, 4 or 5 scenes to change that mood. But with Hal, he's a robot, so you can play him a different way. He works just fine. The Bone and Pool, and by work, I mean he acts just like a regular person. But until Bowman and Poole have their talk in the pod and Hal actually reads their lips, at that point, that is where things shift. That's where Hal realizes they are going to shut him off. Here's where you get that kind of psychopathic, those tendencies, if you can even call it that since he's a robot. But now, Bowman is 1000% sure that he has to turn off Hal, because he might jeopardize the mission. Hal is also, the voice actor playing Hal is absolutely perfect. And then the next sequence of events, what you get is Poole going out to fix the satellite, then Hal locking him out, and then Bowman has to go and save his astronaut buddy. He doesn't, Poole runs out of air, but then Hal locks the entrance. So Bowman has to basically force himself into the ship, and at that point he finally turns Hal off. And then he starts approaching the monolith close to Jupiter. The second part of this finale is what I like to call the LSD infused dream space sequence. If you can even call it that. I mean, this is almost 70s cinema, so I mean it makes sense. I would probably say it lasts a little bit too long for my liking, but to each their own. And obviously what happens is Bowman is put in a literal human zoo where he dies and is reborn as a star child. And in that zoo, these aliens, or these gods, however you want to look at it, are basically observing him and basically just watching him grow old and then die. So the thing is, this could be technically read a couple of ways. The point is that none of these are correct, and any of these are correct. In order to feel satisfied with the movie, you have to come up with your own conclusion. That is a mistake the reporter made with Kubrick. He asked what the ending of The Soul means, and Kubrick gave an answer, which, for this movie, you have to come up with your own. That's the beauty in this movie, is that Kubrick left it ambiguous on purpose so that every person has to answer this question of what happens at the end. So the first way I see it is that the star child is a reincarnation of Jesus, and he is a literal god of the religious aspect. The second way is that the star child is a more direct version of the monolith, where he is observing and people see him. Either he's giving off a force, again the argument from the beginning, is it the monolith or is it some sort of force coming off of the monolith that lets humans evolve. Another version is that these are just aliens who are looking down and observing Earth. And that also can tie into religion, because aliens are weird and outer-worldly, and we obviously see God as, we see God as this white dude, Jesus, who wears a robe, has blonde hair and blue eyes. But God doesn't exist in this realm, in this universe, so obviously he would look outer-worldly, kind of like aliens. In the end, this movie is about how humans evolve, how we change, and how we grow. And for all the people who were mad in 1968 because it didn't answer the cliffhanger, read the book, but you'll get the same answer. That's the beauty of this piece of art, this movie and the book. It doesn't have to answer anything. It is the job of the viewer to come up with a conclusion for themselves. It's just like art. When you look at a piece of Monet, or you look at Van Gogh, it doesn't answer anything. It's just there, and you are impressed by it, and maybe you can, answer kind of what the art is questioning. It is the job of the viewer to come up with a conclusion for themselves. It can be religious, spiritual, whatever you want. For me, it is how the natural evolution in this movie is sped up by the monoliths. Now, personally, I think the monoliths are a mixture of aliens and God. I really like to think that, again, God would be this white dude in a robe, but he would be outer-worldly. But overall, this movie is great. What can I say? This movie is just fantastic. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter how I persuade you. If you have a chance, please watch this movie. I know it is pretty long. It's about 3 hours, and there's only really about 40 minutes of dialogue. But if you can sit through it and get through it and come up with your own conclusions at the very end, it will be a very rewarding process. I know it was for me. Thank you for listening to this analysis. I know this might have been a little bit of a ramble, but I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed it, and if you didn't enjoy it, leave a comment what you did enjoy about it. Thank you very much, and have a good day.